What's up, YouTube? Seth at Huff's Herbs here. And as promised, we're going to continue with our educational videos. This one in particular, we're going to talk about mealworms and how to maintain them. And then we're also going to go into how to breed them if you want to start your own mealworm farm. Today I'm making my substrate that I keep my mealworms on, so I figured it was a good opportunity to go through all the ingredients with you guys and show you exactly what I use. I do grind mine down to make sure that it will be able to sift out so I can separate my mealworms easier. So I use a food processor like this to grind down my oats as well as my dubia chow, and I'll go over that in a minute. Quick note, respirator guys, anytime you're working with any kind of allergen, but especially bug allergens or the food that they eat, or their frass, or their which is their poop, or their molts, which is their shedding, you want to be really careful and protect yourself. You've seen a lot of breeders over the years get out of breeding geckos because they developed a mealworm allergy, and that's from overexposure, guys. Pretty much anybody that is overexposed to these things can develop an allergy. So just make sure that you're protecting yourself. Use proper ventilation. Just a little mask isn't really sufficient. You're still going to be getting air in on the sides. This is the way to go, a full face respirator that creates a suction. Anyway, moving on. So today we made our bedding, or we're making our bedding right now. After we grind it, we do sift it. We use two different sifters. We use this one, which is probably about an 1/8 inch hole size. And that enables us later on when we're trying to harvest worms to use, we're able to separate them from the bedding really easily, because that's about the same hole size as, if I can find it, my little scooper that I use to pull my mealworms out. So this is just a standard little square scooper that you can get at a reptile store. So anyway, that's how I sift my bedding, and then I sift it again with an ultrafine mesh to get all the ultrafine dust out of there. Again, trying to be allergen aware and trying to get the majority of that dust out of the bedding. And I'll save that dust and I'll use that. Later on, I'll show you where I use that at in the actual farming process for the baby mealworms. But moving on to ingredients. So my primary ingredients are straight up old-fashioned oats. Doesn't matter what brand you use. So for each batch, I'll do like about 5 to 6 pounds of oats that I grind and sift. And whatever doesn't sift out, I don't use. I only use what will sift through. And then I use about 4 or 5 pounds of dubia chow. This is a specific chow that I get from a dubia breeder that's in my area. He delivers it to me at every local show, so I have a pretty constant supply of it. If you're interested in some of that, reach out to me. I can get you in contact with him, or I can probably start selling that myself. I may start selling this bedding myself. I don't know. It's just a lot to grind and make. So then I add, so that's my two bases there. And then I'll add some wheat germ. I'll do about 2 pounds of wheat germ per batch. So 5 to 6 pounds of oats, 4 or 5 pounds of dubia chow, 2 pounds of wheat germ. I do add some cornmeal. However, I've found that they don't really eat the cornmeal very well. The worms don't. So it's just kind of an additive, just as a filler, just to help kind of give us some more volume in there. And then this is a really important additive. This is called feeder fuel. This is a gut load that I use that I get from a buddy of mine named Lee Reddy at Reddy's Rainforest. You can buy that directly from him online if you go to his website. Anyway, those last 3 ingredients I do sift out to make sure there's no big pieces in there. Same reason, I don't want to have stuff to have to separate my mealworms from without, other than being able to sift them out. And that's it for the ingredients. And that's about the ratio that I do. About 5 to 6 pounds of oats, 4 or 5 pounds of dubia chow, 2 pounds of wheat germ, 2 pounds of cornmeal, and 1 pound of feeder fuel. Some other things that I'll mention while we're talking about them is what you hydrate your mealworms with is important. I use a lot of carrots. See, they're already just mowing down this carrot. I literally put this in about 60 seconds ago. No, that's not true, because we've been on this video for 5 minutes already. So this has been in here for 5 minutes because I put it on right before I started the video. and they're already just attacking it. Now this bedding right here is almost out. You can see it's real thin. After they eat it and poop it out, it's a lot less volume. So anyway, this is about ready to be changed, and I'll show you the processes I use to sift and change my mealworms. Another thing I'll talk about is their molts, what to do with their molts. Some people, which again, their molts is their shedding. Some people take it outside and hit it with like a blowgun, an air gun, and just blow them out in the air. I'm not a fan of that method. I personally use a high quality HEPA filter hand vac for specific to my mealworms. This vacuum stays right here by my mealworm area. And so all my mealworms, I vacuum up their molts with this. It's really simple. You just hold it up above. You know, you start out a few inches above and then just keep going down until you start getting molts to come up. And then you can just, and if you hold it high enough, you're not going to suck up any worms. It's kind of an art to learn exactly what level to hold it at, but you'll get used to it and figure it out. But that's the best method I've found. That way you're not kicking dust back in the air. And then separating and sifting them. So I have a couple of different containers I've set up. This wire is, again, about the same size wire as these scoops you can get from the reptile shops for separating worms. So this will separate large worms from medium and small worms. So in other words, if you put a scoop of worms in here, put it however full you want, the small and medium worms are going to try to get away from the light, so they're going to go through the screen, and your large worms are going to stay on top. Then those medium and small worms I can take and dump them in this other bin that I have. And that one has smaller holes. I'm sure it's hard to tell on there, but these holes are much smaller. These are more like, I don't know, 1/16 of an inch. And this will separate medium from small worms. So your small will fall through and your medium will stay. So I can stack these like this, large, medium, small, and my worms will totally self-separate after just sitting there for a while. You can speed up the process by putting a fresh piece of carrot, a fresh cut piece of carrot in the very bottom one. And that way they'll not only be trying to get away from the light, but they'll all be trying to get to the hydration, to the carrot. So they'll all try to go through the screen to get down to the bottom. So that's how I separate my worm sizes. That way I can separate my smalls and mediums out from my baby geckos and or separate my large worms out to move on to make beetles for breeding. And then this tub right here is some really fine mesh. This is actually the bags that they send mealworms in. If you buy like 5,000 mealworms or whatever from a mealworm place, they usually send them in a mesh bag. And I use that to cut up and make the false bottom for this tub. This is what I use, like on that batch I was just showing you, is almost all frass in there. I'll take this outside soon, because we want to reduce allergens. I'll take this outside. I'll dump that whole tub into here with my mask on, give it a good shake, sift all that frass out of here. All the frass will fall down. Frass is the poop again. Frass will fall down, worms will stay up here, plus any bedding that was left will stay up here because only the fine stuff will fall through. And then I can dump those worms back in here, add them some fresh bedding, and they're good to go. And then the frass I can either save for my garden, save to make isopod chow, or a lot of it I just throw away because I've got a pretty big bucket saved at this point. I think that about covers it on mealworms. Oh, temperatures. So, dang, I should have covered that first. So really, really, really important. Temperatures matter with mealworms. If you have them at about 75 to 80 degrees, that's a little bit on the higher end of their spectrum, and they're going to grow and molt very quickly. That's good if you're wanting to grow them from small to medium or from medium to large. But if you already have medium or large mealworms and you're trying to maintain that size, that's not a good temperature because they're going to go into their molting phase of going into a pupa. And once they're a pupa, that's the little alien looking things that wiggle around when you touch them. Once they're a pupa, at that point, they're pretty much useless to you because they don't move around enough to interest the geckos. And so unless you're breeding mealworms and want beetles, the pupa are pretty much no good at that point. If you are breeding, which I'll get into that in a minute, then the pupa are a good thing to have. But so temperatures, best temperatures, if you can get your hands on a wine cooler and set it at red wine setting, that's at about 55 degrees. That's the best temps I've found to keep mealworms at a good stable, not growing quickly, but still being active and still growing slowly. That's a good tip there. If you want to dial them down a notch from that, you put them on a white wine setting, and that's at about 45 degrees, and that'll slow them down pretty considerably, but still not dormant. If you put them in the actual refrigerator, it's almost too cold and they kind of go dormant. Refrigerators are about 34 degrees usually, and that's just a little bit on the cooler end, and they're not doing much, they're not eating much, they're just kind of there. And you'll lose a lot to die off because they're too cold. So 45 degrees, 45, 50 degrees for like pretty slow, 50 to 60 degrees for average kind of activity level and slow growth rate, and then 60 to 70 for a little bit quicker, and then 70 to 80 for kind of their high end. And pretty much the metabolism changes with temperatures based on just about any bugs you're messing with. Within their range of operation, they're gonna have a higher metabolism and a higher growth rate at the higher range of their temp range, or the higher range of that window. So just keep that in mind no matter what bugs you're dealing with. Now on breeding, let's jump into that now. Like I showed you the separation tub that I have, which is pretty big screen, like a little bit bigger than 1/8 inch probably. I have a beetle tub with that same bottom. Okay, I made a false bottom on this beetle tub. Now I'm not going to take it apart to show you because I just now set these guys up. I just harvested them and set them up. But there's a false bottom on there with that same size mesh. Oh, you can see it through there. So this is my beetle tub. There's a few hundred beetles in here. You can't even see them because they're all buried in the oats right now because I just put a bunch of new. But this is how I keep my beetles. I put whole oats in here, as well as, remember I said I sift out the fine. I add a little bit of that, about a cup worth at a time, into this, and that's what's going to fall through and create your first bedding for your next batch of worms. So once every 3 or 4 weeks, I give this a good shake, get all the stuff down into the catch tub, take that contents from the catch tub, and I run it through my separator. Okay, that way all the big stuff I can take out and toss out. All the medium stuff I actually typically put back in the beetle tub because it will just create another good substrate for the next batch of worms, as well as the fine that I'm going to put in there. And then all the fine falls through with all your eggs and babies. Now I'm going to show you. So this is my last 3 harvests, okay? This is the one I just harvested about an hour ago, and you can't even really see anything in there. Yeah, I'm not even going to put it up to the camera because you can't see anything. This one I harvested about a month ago, I would say. And look, you can see some little worms in there. Pretty small, though. Very, very small worms, but they're all over in there. So there's thousands of worms in here. You can see their molts starting to accumulate there on top. Their molts are going to naturally accumulate on top. Oh, quick fact. Damn, should have mentioned this earlier too. The molts, if you're seeing molts, that means that they have enough food to eat. If you're not seeing molts at all, that means they're eating their molts, which means they're living on just frass. So keep that in mind whenever you're kind of observing whether or not you need to sift them out and put new bedding or not. If you're having to vacuum molts regularly, then you still have bedding in there. If all of a sudden you have to stop vacuuming molts, but they still look like they're growing and being active, then that means that they're on just frass and they have resorted to eating their molts. That's a little known fact that not a lot of people are aware of. All right, so this is a little bit bigger batch of worms. These were harvested probably about 2 months ago. And so these, as you can see, have a little bit of size to them. They're still very, very tiny because they grow very slowly. But that's why it's just kind of a long process of getting it going and then having the whole cycle. And what's great about breeding your own worms, guys, is guess what? I have baby geckos. And sometimes baby geckos need little bitty worms. And little bitty worms can be kind of hard to get in the mail sometimes because they're kind of fragile. Well, I always have little bitty worms because I breed my own, so I always have babies on hand. So that allows me to always have the sizes that I need, no matter what size that is. Anyway, I think that's all I have for you guys regarding mealworms. Make sure to remember to gut load really well. In addition to keeping them, this is like a maintenance bedding that I just showed you. For the gut loading process, right before I feed them off, I'll put them on just feeder fuel for a little while and let them marinate in that for about a day with fresh veggies, carrots, sweet potatoes, spaghetti squash, dark leafy greens. And I'll give them about 12 hours on that before I feed them off to my geckos. Other than that, I keep their hydration kind of on a minimal level. About probably twice a week, I'll add fresh carrots in there for them to hydrate. That way they're not getting any death from dehydration. I think that's it, guys. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. And keep on keeping on. Later.